I, 29F, have been married to my husband, 29M, for a year. I met him 2 years ago at a friend's birthday party and we felt something click almost instantly. We got along really well and soon enough, we were in a serious relationship. My relationship and marriage were as normal as anyone else's with its regular ups and downs except for maybe one thing. My husband still had a BFF from his college days and he was very close to her still. I'll refer to her as Nina, 29F. My husband and Nina have been friends for over 10 years and she was even the best man at our wedding. I didn't have anything against her and maybe I did feel a little insecure in the initial stages of my relationship, but with time, I started relaxing around Nina as well because when I asked my husband about her, he reassured me that they'd always been friends and would never ever be anything more than that. Nina was a little weird, in my personal opinion. I think the Gen Z kids nowadays are calling women like her pick me, so I'd say that that's how she was. She never put me down and I believe that it was out of respect for my husband, but she didn't ever hesitate to talk crap about other women and make fun of them for just doing feminine things. She'd mock other women we knew for liking makeup, not watching sports and not drinking beer, etc. I didn't like that side of her, but I'm not a very confrontational person, so I didn't say anything to her either, and as long as my husband wasn't joining in on that, I was fine with it. Recently, Nina had a really bad breakup. She'd been dating this guy she met at work and they'd been together for a little over a year. Nina was crazy about this guy and my husband had told me that she might even want to marry this boyfriend of hers. I was actually kind of relieved because he told me that most of her relationships before this were pretty short-lived, and that used to make me worry that maybe Nina had a thing for my husband, but if she was planning to marry this guy then that probably wasn't the case. 1.5 weeks ago, though, she showed up at our house in a really bad state and I was really alarmed because she looked totally out of sorts and was actually sobbing. Later on, after my husband and I comforted her and calmed her down, we found out that her boyfriend had just dumped her right before she was about to ask him to marry her because he'd gone through her texts a few minutes before when she was in the shower and he'd found a dating app on it. He was naturally livid about that and accused her of cheating, but she insisted that the app was there just because she got bored sometimes and would treat it like a game for matches but wouldn't actually speak to anyone or initiate anything. But he didn't like her explanation and left her anyway. Personally, I think her excuse was just ridiculous. If she was really that bored then she should have downloaded some actual games on her phone instead of a dating app. I don't know anyone who does that and I don't think her boyfriend was wrong. But my husband was consoling her and telling her that it wasn't her fault and that he'd help her get him back if that's what she wanted. My husband let her stay over that night on the couch and even watched over her because he said that he'd never seen her like this and he wanted to make sure that she was alright. He told me that I could sleep in the bedroom, but I decided to sleep on the pull-out couch with him because I felt uneasy leaving them alone in the living room. So we all ended up sleeping in the living room, my husband and I on the pull-out couch and Nina on the other couch. The next morning, she was supposed to leave but she stayed on because she said she felt too weak to go back home alone and my husband requested me to let her stay, so I agreed. I didn't want to, but I didn't know how to ask her to leave when my husband was trying to convince me otherwise, and like I said, I'm just a total pushover when it comes to my loved ones, and so I let her stay. For the next couple of days, it was all about Nina. My husband was attending to every need of hers and waiting on her constantly as if she were a sick little girl and not just another 30-year-old going through a breakup. It was weird for me, and on several occasions, I wanted so badly to say something against it, but my husband kept talking about how poor Nina was going through something so bad and how her boyfriend didn't even deserve her, but they were still trying to get him back. I wasn't feeling particularly sympathetic towards the woman who'd basically just taken over my home, my husband, and my life, so I wouldn't say much and would just let him talk whenever Nina wasn't around. My husband had started distancing himself from me after Nina showed up and it just became all about her after a while. She was all he talked about. It was always just poor Nina this and poor Nina that, and that was all he talked about. I started getting really annoyed after a while and was almost about to sit him down and talk to him about how this living situation wasn't working anymore and Nina needed to go home. A few days ago, I came back home to find that my husband had come back before me, and it was kind of surprising because he usually tells me when he comes back home early. Even after Nina's arrival, we'd all been going to work as usual and the first one to come back was usually me. I unlocked the door and headed in, but the living room was empty, so I went towards the bedroom and found the door slightly ajar, and when I peeked in, I saw my husband sitting on the bed with Nina. They were talking and Nina was fiddling with her phone while sulking, as usual. I wanted to barge in and let them know I was back home because they clearly hadn't heard me enter, but it was too tempting to listen to what they were talking about when I was not around, so I remained outside and decided to eavesdrop on their conversation. My husband was telling Nina that this was bound to happen at some point and that she deserved better, so my guess was that Nina's ex had finally told her to stop contacting him or something similar. Then Nina started whining once more about how this was all so unfair and that he was being too hard on her for no reason apart from the fact that she just downloaded a dating app to mess around with. Then, she said that she wished she'd never dated him in the first place, but she was just so desperate to get married, at her age, that she was ready to settle for anyone at this point. My husband told her that she was being ridiculous and that she deserved better, to which Nina said something that made my stomach drop. She actually started flirting with my husband and told him that she wished she'd married him instead, but now, she'd missed her chance and it was too late for them now. I expected my husband to say something to dismiss that or to tell her to stop, at the very least. I didn't expect him to say what he said next. He told Nina that even he occasionally found himself wishing that he'd married her instead of me, and of late, he'd been wondering how different life would have been if that had been the case. As if that wasn't hard enough for me to hear, he even added more to that and told her that after Nina had started living with us, he'd sometimes imagine her to be his wife instead, and the two of them started giggling. I was disgusted and immediately made up my mind to leave. I'd heard enough and I didn't need to hear more, so I went back out the door and drove to the nearest hotel, and once I was in the room, I completely broke down. I've been in the hotel since then and have also blocked my husband, all his friends and family, and obviously Nina, too. It's been 3 days since then and I haven't been out of the hotel room since then. Yesterday, my husband texted me from a friend's phone and I'd forgotten to block that particular friend of mine, so I unfortunately received those texts as well. He told me that he knew I'd overheard the conversation he'd been having with Nina because when I left, I'd forgotten to shut the door behind me. He said that he didn't know how much I'd heard, but he wanted to let me know that he'd just been saying all that to make Nina feel better about herself, and he still loved me, not her. He also said that Nina had left that day itself after he told her that she couldn't stay anymore if it was making me insecure, and that I needed to come back so that we could discuss this. Now I don't know what to think of it because, on one hand, I want to go back to him because I really do love him, but I'm just so tired of being such a pushover and letting people walk all over me. I think that I'm the one who was an idiot, and that's why this even happened. If I'd put my foot down and made my husband tell Nina to leave earlier, then I wouldn't be in this situation at all, so I don't know what to think right now. I can't talk to any of my friends or family about this because I feel like I was a total fool here and let my husband treat me like a second option, and I don't feel like explaining the situation to them either because it's just so pathetic. I was an idiot and my husband was, well, there's just no way I can justify what he did. He really had no need to say what he did to Nina. So what if I refuse to go back to him? Update 1. I told him today that I'm not coming back and will be filing for divorce soon. I unblocked him and texted him back on his own number. He called me as soon as I sent that text and he sounded very upset on the phone. He just repeated everything he'd already said in his text, that he was just trying to make Nina feel better and that he didn't mean anything that he'd said. He said that he'd asked Nina to leave the day itself and even said that I could talk to Nina if I didn't believe him. I told him that it wasn't about whether I believed him or not. He just couldn't say things like that to another woman and expect me to be alright with it, and I wasn't interested in talking to Nina. Even if my husband didn't mean what he'd said, she definitely had meant it, and just like I'd always known, she'd wanted my husband all to herself all along. Even thinking about the fact that I'd let her stay with us made me sick because she and my husband had made a total fool out of me and I'd let them. But at least I was going to leave now and wouldn't make the mistake of staying with him any longer. After that phone call, I blocked him again and decided to tell my friends and family that I was leaving him because it had been almost a week and none of them knew what I'd been up to. I'd even been working remotely because I was so depressed. But I was finally feeling better and I wanted to rip the band-aid off today itself. I'm finally feeling relieved now and I think I made the right choice. I've been a fool to ever believe that Nina and my husband wouldn't take advantage of my kindness and the fact that I never questioned their relationship, never tried to ruin their friendship, never stood in the way, and tried to help Nina through her breakup. I'm not ready to be a fool anymore. This is where it ends. Update 2. Hey, everyone. Thanks to everyone who's been nice and non-judgmental. I really needed that because this is all really difficult for me anyway. I spoke to a lawyer today, a friend of my dad's, and he reassured me that he'll help me to the best of his abilities. We're going to file for divorce in a few days. I also decided that I wanted to go back home today to collect my things because I'd left in a rush and hadn't taken anything apart from my work laptop and my car with me. I bought some clothes from a nearby store, but I obviously can't live in the hotel forever and need more clothes and toiletries if I want to move out. So I went back home today at a time when I thought my husband wouldn't be at home, a little after 1 p.m. Unfortunately, his car was parked in the driveway and so was Nina's, and seeing that, I left. Clearly, he'd been lying to me about Nina having left. Or maybe she had left that day, but once I told my husband that my decision to leave was final, she'd moved back in with him. I felt awful when I saw her car there, but I'm trying not to let these things get to me anymore because that'll just make it harder for me to keep it together. I can't afford to break down mentally when I'm already going to have to prepare for a divorce and have to rejoin work in a day or two. I've spoken to a friend of mine and she's been kind enough to let me live at her place for a few days while I look for a new apartment or house for myself. Everyone's been really helpful and I'm really lucky to have such wonderful and supportive friends and family because I don't think I'd be able to get through this otherwise. Update 3. Hey. I haven't been able to update as often because I was really caught up with work and I also moved into a new apartment yesterday, so I've had my plate full for a while. I filed for divorce almost a week ago and my husband was served 3 days back. He was not happy about it. I know because the day before yesterday, I went back to the house so I could collect all my things once and for all. I'm not taking any of the furniture yet because the apartment I'm renting is pre-furnished, so I don't need it as such. He was furious when I showed up at the house and he was trying to talk to me, but I just ignored him and didn't engage in any conversation. I told him that I'd just come back to take my things and I'd be done in an hour or so. I'd also brought along my friend to help, the friend I'd been living with previously, so that I wouldn't have to deal with him on my own. He tried to talk to me initially, but when that failed, he stopped trying and I thought that he'd given up and felt relieved, but within half an hour, Nina had also shown up. I could choose not to talk to them, but I couldn't just drown them out when they were talking to me, and so I had to listen to Nina talk about how my husband had asked her to leave that day, just for my sake, and that even though she felt like she'd fallen in love with him, she was ready to sacrifice it so that we could be together. She kept talking about how she was going through a really tough time in her life, and that's why she wanted me to stay with her best friend, because her own heart had already been broken, first by her ex and now by my husband. She didn't want to feel responsible and guilty for breaking up our marriage as well, and that's why she wanted me to stay with him. I don't know how I managed not to fly off the handle when she was saying those things, and even my friend looked scandalized because of how ridiculous those two were being. It was beyond selfish of them, but I'd learned that thinking about other people and their feelings was definitely not their strong suit. I just didn't have anything to say to them anymore, because I don't think anything sensible can even penetrate those thick skulls of theirs, and I'm not interested in wasting my breath. If they can think of themselves as the victims even in situations like this, then, really there's nothing that I can say or do to change their minds. So anyway, I guess that was the last time that we met without lawyers and informally. I'm out of there for good. Update 4. Hello, folks. It's been almost 2 weeks since I filed for divorce, and my husband finally responded a couple of days back. My husband, surprisingly, decided not to contest it. I had mixed feelings about that, because the way he was acting the last time we met actually made me think that he wanted me back, but I guess not. I'm obviously a little surprised by this, but I'm also relieved that he isn't contesting it, because that would just lead to more complications. My lawyer suggested that we find proof of him being in an affair with Nina, and I honestly don't think that it'll be that hard. I heard from a friend that they spotted my husband holding hands with Nina in a cafe around a week back, but it didn't look very romantic. My husband looked upset and Nina looked like she was comforting him. I didn't know what to make of that, but I did mention it to my lawyer, and he said that this information would definitely help us in the divorce. On one hand, I obviously feel really upset that my husband is spending so much of his time with Nina, because that just reinforces what I already knew, that he'd only ever had eyes for her and never me. He'd not only wasted his own time, but he'd also wasted my time and Nina's as well, because he couldn't get his feelings in order. I don't know what to think anymore, and emotionally I've just been numb. I've only been going to work and coming back like a robot, because I just feel so empty and awful all the time. All the anger, sadness, betrayal, and pain I was feeling has been replaced by this emptiness, because I just don't know what I did to deserve this. Maybe I was stupid enough to believe that my husband being so close with Nina would never cause any problems in our marriage, and even tried to be that woman's friend, but I don't think even that warrants something like this. Yeah, I was dumb, but this is just crazy. I've been trying to put on a brave face, but I'm just exhausted and don't know how long I can keep this up, honestly. I feel like I rushed into this whole relationship and marriage with my husband just because I didn't want to lose him, because he was one of the rare people that I actually connected with. I didn't think that this would ever backfire so badly, but here we are. At this point I don't care what happens in the divorce or the settlement. I just want to be out of this and don't want anything more to do with my husband. I want this nightmarish relationship to come to an end, and I want people to never talk to me about him ever again. Or about Nina either. I just want to be done with this, no matter what it takes. Update 5. So, it's been 2 days since the last update, and I've been at my wit's end on what to do or how to prove that my husband and Nina were involved in an emotional affair. I was also feeling really low, knowing that even if I did somehow manage to prove that, it would be me who would feel like crap about whatever I would find. But then a few hours ago, I received an email from my husband where he just basically confessed that he'd slept with Nina last night because both of them were feeling really depressed. He said that they were drunk and sad and couldn't stay apart anymore on my account because I'd made it very clear that I wouldn't take him back and we were done. He'd sent it from a new email address, and when I read it, I was broken. I genuinely didn't know what to feel, and I still don't, to a certain extent. So it had finally happened, and while I knew that this was something to be happy about because he'd basically just confessed to infidelity, it also meant that all the things that I was afraid of when I first got into a relationship happened to be true after all. I knew this. I'd known it all along, but to finally accept it and confront it was just so damn difficult. I ended up crying for a while after I read that email, but then I did forward it to my lawyer and he seemed pleased with it. However, even if I was sorted on the legal front, I was emotionally shattered. I just wanted someone to reassure me that it'd be okay, so I called my dad up, since he's always been there for me, big or small, and told him what had happened. He was at my door within half an hour with cake and ice cream, and my mom came along with him, so that was just really sweet of them. I ended up crying some more when they arrived, but eventually, they managed to get me to stop crying and consoled me. They didn't tell me that this wasn't my fault. They didn't make me feel judged. They were just there, and honestly, that's all that I needed to feel better. I knew that I could have been a little more aware and smarter about this whole thing, and maybe I could have avoided this situation altogether, but what's done was done now, and I couldn't change the past, so I had to just move on and focus on the future. My parents told me they'd be staying with me for a while and make sure that I was alright, because they told me that I'd lost an insane amount of weight and they couldn't just let me sit around and sulk anymore. I'm grateful for that, and I hope that I feel better soon, and also that my divorce will be finalized soon. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Found out cheating wife took a trip to meet up with her app, so I showed up and this happened. Today I'm going to tell you all about one crazy, life-changing event that happened to me. It all started when I got a phone call halfway through my workday. My wife, 27, and I, 33, were married for 6 years at this point, and she had been looking for a job for a year. She earned a small amount of money by making crafts and selling them on Etsy. I didn't want her to feel rushed or forced to get a job she hated. She'd already been through a really crappy childhood, so I only ever wanted to motivate her and make her feel safe. Our relationship seemed wonderful to me. She would get depressed sometimes, and I knew it was because of painful memories of the past. I asked her what was on her mind at least once a day, but much of the time she didn't say anything. When she did, it wasn't anything I could help with or didn't already know. So on this particular day at work, I got a phone call from the police department of the next county over. I was confused but listened as he explained that he had no choice but to arrest my wife today. Understandably, I freaked out. I asked him what the hell happened and what was going on. He said they received several calls about a woman setting a car on fire in one of the residential neighborhoods. My first thought was that there was no way it was my wife, but he verified her name and phone number and said they had possession of her car. I was absolutely mind-effed. I asked if she gave any statement, the reason for being there, or an explanation, and he said so far she was unwilling to talk to them. I asked if she was allowed to call me, and instead, he asked me to come in person to talk to her. I agreed. When I got there, they had me sit in the interview room with her. Her expression went from hardened and angry, to soft and defeated. She covered her face with her hands. I asked her what the heck happened. I needed to know because I could not figure this out. She whispered that she couldn't tell me. I asked why. She said it was because we were being recorded, and I wouldn't want to know. I said she was wrong, I wanted to know, and she was apparently caught red-handed, so the only thing left to do was explain herself. She sat up, revealing her reddened and depressed face. She said she was setting fire to her ex's car because he cheated on her. After I let this sink in a bit, I asked her how long ago this happened, and why seek revenge now. She really didn't want to answer me anymore, but I was her husband. She was in a police station. Her options were limited. After breathing a lot and crying, she told me he cheated on her last night. I said, what? And she went on to explain that she'd been seeing him for a few months while I was at work. I could not believe what I was hearing. The cops were gonna have a ball watching this drama unfold. So I clarified that she was seeing App behind my back, and when she found out he cheated on her last night, she decided to set his car on fire in broad daylight. After hearing my words, she looked like a shell of a woman. I told her I was ashamed to be her husband. She exposed her own affair by losing any self-control or responsibility she had left. I told her we were over and left the police station. I got a few sorry looks from some of the officers. My wife freaked out. She could only call people with permission from the cops, so the next person she called was her grandmother who raised her. Her grandmother actually thought it was a scam call, and didn't look into it any further for another 3 weeks. Then, she was finally contacted and paid my wife's bail. In order to afford it, she had to take out a loan. This was just the start of my wife's consequences. After she was out of jail, she tried to call me over and over again. After receiving 15 calls in one day, I finally answered it. She begged me to hear her out and at least meet her for coffee. She said it was the least I could do after the ordeal she'd been through, and our 6-year relationship deserved one more chance of survival. I laughed a good hearty laugh. I told her our 6-year relationship was over, dead, in the past. I only kept that relationship with her in good faith that she would never go behind my back and sleep with another man. Not only did she do that, but she also jumped a criminal activity by setting his car on fire. She wailed and sobbed into the phone like it was her lifeline. I told her she made the decision to go behind my back, and anyone should know it's only a matter of time before the truth comes out. I just got lucky because her idiotic actions did the work for me. I wished her luck in whatever she tries to do next with her life. As I said that, she started screaming for me not to hang up, but I did. Her aunt contacted me 4 months later. She asked if she could bring a truck over to get my ex's belongings. I said that was fine, and she went on to explain that my ex's grandmother passed away, and the house was in foreclosure. So my ex was moving in with her, and I'd finally get her crappy belongings out of my house. That sounded fine to me. I did wonder how she was holding up, but I didn't ask. By this point, I started seeing another woman and did not want to give any false hope by asking questions. I hope my story encourages everyone not to cheat on their partner. There are 2 things that helped me get through this ordeal the most. The first was exercising daily. I didn't want to do it, but I forced myself to use my muscles until I could feel the burn. It helped me to get out built-up anger and turn my attitude around for the better. I wasn't feeling down on myself, I was feeling positive and capable. The second thing I did was show myself love and care, by doing what I wanted. Most of the time it was listening to music and dancing, other times it was reading, watching TV, drawing, playing music, or going for a walk.